is my cue for starting to sing. None of you want to hear that. Hello, my name is Philip Dwyer, and I am the co-chair of Fairfield Cares. I've been active with Cares for over a decade, almost as long as Kristen, but she helped start the thing, so she's got another year or two on me. So first, thank you for coming out to this, our annual meeting. It is considered to be a celebration event because we want to celebrate the work that we have done this past year, and also to celebrate a couple of people who have made a difference in the work of the coalition. So we'll take a little bit of time to do that celebration and recognition, and then Kristen will be the last person to give an award, and will be the first person who will introduce our speaker for the evening. Following his presentation, you'll see a microphone down here in front, and you're welcome to come down to the microphone and ask whatever question you want. We want to get as many questions as possible, so I strongly encourage you not to make a 10-minute statement of opinion followed by a question. Try and get to the question as soon as you can. As a former public official, I've been to more than a few meetings like this where that seems to be the pattern. It's a time to have a microphone voice, and then you say, oh, that's what too, I'm supposed to ask a question too. So at the end of the presentation, we'll do Q&A for a reasonable amount of time, and that will be our evening. So again, thank you for coming out. I want to read to you the vision statement of Fairfield Cares, because I think it's important for you to know why we are in existence. From our bylaws, the short vision statement is Fairfield Cares envisions a community that promotes healthy, responsible choices through prevention and education for youth, young adults, and families. We have a longer mission statement, and that reads that Fairfield Cares Community Coalition focuses on preventing substance misuse, fostering social and emotional wellness and resilience among youth, young adults, and families. The coalition builds capacity, mobilizes the Fairfield community, and develops comprehensive strategies to help families make healthy choices that allow youth and young adults to thrive. My shorthand view of what Fairfield Cares is we are a community-based, volunteer-driven organization. We depend on volunteers, parents, professionals, school staff, community leaders to join with us in monthly meetings and take on the challenge of constantly adapting to the changing things that happen with teenagers and youth. So anybody in this room, I'm going to try and station a couple people at the back doors, so that before you go, we're going to ask you to say, yes, I want to sign up. That's a joke. We won't trap you in here. But if you do have any interest whatsoever in being active in our vision and our mission, I strongly encourage you to reach out to me or Kristen, Riney, Kathy, any of us, and we'll try and get you involved to respect whatever time you have and whatever skill you have that can help move this agenda along. Having said that, let's go on to the annual awards, and I would ask Kristen McCarthy-Vahey, State Representative and former immediate past co-chair, to come forward, and Wendy Venta-Vega, who is also a past co-chair, and Kathy Haslett, who's our coalition coordinator and program director, to give out the awards. So as they come forward, I've already mentioned Kristen, but we also have in the House the chairman of the Board of Education, Christine Vitale. So we thank her for coming here tonight. She's had a fairly easy job these last 2 years. And we have a couple of others that were scheduled, but I didn't see them come in. So if there's any other elected public official in the room, point yourself out so that I don't miss you. I don't see anybody suddenly jumping up. So, oh, there's Drew in the back. Okay, Drew Georgiardis, member of the RTM. Thank you very much, Drew, for coming as well. So, for the first award to be given out, I'd ask Kathy to come forward and give that award.
It is my most distinct privilege and honor to award our Youth Award to Libby Shaw, who, Libby, come on up. She has been our youth leader for the past 2 years, and she's interested in becoming a teacher. And let me tell you something, her leadership skills, her organizational skills are exemplary. And we have had a very active youth committee for these past 2 years, all due to Libby's activism, coordination, and outreach. And I can't tell you how much I'm going to miss her. And so, Libby, I'm going to read you this award. The Fairfield Cares Community Coalition, the local prevention council for the town of Fairfield, Connecticut, recognizes Olivia R. Shaw as the 2022 recipient of the Fairfield Cares Youth Award for her outstanding contributions as youth leader from 2020 to 2022.
Wendy to come forward and give out an award for a partner agency that has made a difference in the work that we do.
Good evening. I would like to invite Vanessa Wilson and Margaret Watt up to join me while I speak about why they're coming up. The agency, the Partner Agency Award this year is being given to Positive Directions, the Center for Prevention and Counseling. They are a Westport-based leader in prevention services and counseling services, and they have been with us from just about from the get-go. They've collaborated with us for over 12 years. In 2010, they brought the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services Best Practice Grant to Fairfield to address underage drinking rates, which our student survey had revealed were rather high. They've since gone down, by the way. Their extensive community experience with coalitions has allowed them to offer us guidance on how to run a coalition when we first started out, how to grow it and expand the variety of community leaders and members within our coalition. They created our first social media campaign, introduced our first and launched our first parent survey to supplement the student survey we've always done. And they have even agreed to be the fiduciary for any of our fundraising efforts. That's just to name a few of the things. Their contributions have been many and continue. They are ongoing, and we could not ask for better partners. They've helped us get to where we are. It's truly been a collaborative partnership, and we can't thank them enough. And this is Vanessa Wilson is the Executive Director of Positive Directions, and Margaret Watt is the Prevention Director. And they, again, our relationship with them has been invaluable, and we want to thank them and award them with this award that recognizes, again, Fairfield Cares Community Coalition, the local prevention council for the town of Fairfield, Connecticut, recognizes Positive Directions as the 2022 recipient of the Fairfield Cares Community Partner Award for their significant and most deeply appreciated contributions to the coalition.
So now I'll invite Kristen to come forward and give the volunteer award.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you to everyone for being here. And I know we all want to hear Marc speak. But before we do, we need to recognize our volunteer of the year and really of this coalition, Ryan North. Fairfield Cares would not be here today without Ryan North. If you follow us on social media, and I hope you will, Ryan is the person behind the curtain. Ryan is the person who helps us set up the tech for today. Ryan is the person who helps us do programs. Ryan is the person who has a smile on her face, has the wisdom to help guide us, and has the persistence and just incredible goodwill. And it is our good fortune to be able to present to you, Ryan, and to thank you for your years and years of service to this organization. So with that, Ryan North, we recognize you as the 2022 recipient of the Fairfield Cares Volunteer Award for your dedication and infinite contributions to the coalition.
Award event doesn't happen unless you've taken a photograph of it. So have a little bit of patience while we take one. So now I give you back to Kristen McCarthy-Vahey to introduce our featured speaker.
Thank you. And now for the moment you've all been waiting for. You can see that Fairfield Cares Community Coalition, there's a lot of family energy. And today we have someone who is here today to help us in our families, to help us in our workplaces, to help us in our schools, and to help us in our own individual lives. Marc Brackett, we are so grateful to have you here with us today. Marc, for those of you who don't know him, he is a researcher, 20 years. He is a psychologist. He's the founding director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. He's a professor. He has developed the Ruler program, which some of you may be familiar with, an approach to social emotional learning, which is used in over 2,000 schools. And if I'm not mistaken, Marc, over half of the schools right here in Connecticut. Marc is inviting us to be curious explorers of our own emotions. And he wants us not only to talk about, but to listen to our feelings. He's witty, willing to share his own personal journey and story, and has a message that we really need now more than ever before. I feel excited to hear Marc Brackett present, if we can get the tech figured out. And I hope that you leave here today feeling both inspired and empowered. And if the timing is right, he's a versatile speaker. So I turn it over with just much gratitude to Marc Brackett.
everybody.
Hello.
It's 7:25. How are you feeling? Obviously, you have a rich vocabulary. Firstly, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to do a live presentation. I've done 377 Zoom ones over the last couple of years. And so if I am awkward, it's just because I'm out of practice. And I'm going to move this thing because it's weird. So maybe we can just get settled. We just saw a bunch of awards, just probably working all day, or thinking all day, or pontificating all day. Maybe just take a nice long inhale and exhale. Just bring yourself into the room, whatever that means for you, other than falling asleep. And so, right before the pandemic hit, I released this book called Permission to Feel. Never intending or even thinking that, a couple of months later the world would shut down, and that the mental well-being of our society would diminish in many ways, like it has. But I want to basically make this presentation one of hope, because I believe that maybe with this crisis is an opportunity to finally take seriously, what's going on inside of our heads and all the feelings that we've been having for more than the last 2 years, but the last 10, 20, 30, or 40 years. And so with that said, we're going to start with a quote. And, oh no, we're not. We're going to start with resources. I'm used to doing my own slides. Anyway, that's where you can learn information about the book. Go back one, sorry. And if you want to go deeper in terms of your own professional development, we also have a company that works with companies as opposed to schools. I'll be talking today mostly about the work that we do in schools and with families. Now for our opening quote by Haruki Murakami. Here we go. And once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain. When you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person you walked in. So just let's pause there. Take a moment and just think about how that quote resonates with you. What does it make you think about? Maybe some of you are saying, this storm is still going on. But I think all of us have learned something over the last couple of years. What's your one message? What's your one pearl from the last 2 years of craziness? If you think about one thing that you learned about yourself, about your community, about your family, what comes to mind? So I'll just say for me it's gratitude. And as someone who studies gratitude and has read everything on gratitude, sometimes it gets a little cliche, doesn't it? Like, just take a minute and think about what you're grateful for. You're like, But in the end, I learned so much about my life. I learned so much about the world. I realized that I had the opportunity to work from home for a big part of the pandemic, and I saw teachers try to figure out how to make their lives work, and parents try to make their lives work, and saw people working in grocery stores and didn't have a choice to go to work. And I'm a professor in the medical school. I saw doctors and nurses putting their lives at risk every day, seeing patients. And I don't know, so I look around the world now and I'm like, I need to be a kinder person. I need to tip a little better than I used to tip. I need to, be a bit more generous. And so maybe the theme tonight can be about generosity. And on that note, we're going to jump right into our first tool of the night. So for those of you who know Ruler, like my friend here from Bridgeport who's wearing his Ruler shirt, I didn't actually ask him to wear that. Free advertising, that's the best, right? This tool is deceptively simple. And the reason why it's deceptively simple is that it just looks like a box with 4 colors in it. But yet, as we're going to see in a moment, it's a little bit deeper than that. Now, x-axis says the word pleasantness. To most people, they just think, oh, are you happy or are you sad? I'm going to ask us to go a little deeper with that and say, do you feel like approaching the day, or do you feel like avoiding the day? Do you feel safe and comfortable where you live, where you work? Do you feel unsafe or uncomfortable? Our brains were actually built to ensure our survival. A lot of people think they're built to help us think about things. That comes later. You gotta survive before you can start thinking. And so when we wake up in the morning, when we walk into an auditorium, when we walk into a school, when we walk into any environment, our brains are kind of making meaning out of the environment, saying, approach, avoid. I'm gonna be safe, I'm gonna be unsafe. So where are you right now? +5. This is the absolute most pleasant experience of your whole life. From the look of your facial expressions, there is nobody there yet. -5, you're like, I hate this guy already. What am I doing here? I'm going to spend 8:30 talking about emotions from some guy from New Haven? Like, really? I need my head examined. So, where are you right now? Please give yourself a number from -5 to +5. It's really what's going on for you here. Now, the y-axis says energy. Energy literally has to do with how much resources you feel you have. +5, you feel like, yes, I'm pumped, I can thrive. -5, your body's giving you signals that you're completely depleted of your resources. You want to just go home and put the covers over your head and just fall asleep and disappear. So what's your body telling you right now? Are you energized or are you depleted? And of course, we put those two axes together and we create our medidor emocional. We got yellow, red, blue, and green. Let me get a quick raise of hands. How many of you are somewhere in the yellow tonight? High energy and pleasant. Okay, green, you're pleasant, but your energy is kind of low. Okay, anybody in the blue or red, a little uncomfortable, a little low energy, a little activated? Okay, and some of you have no feelings at all. So like, I don't know what this guy's talking about. Now, whether you are conscious of it or not, you're having feelings at every moment of the day, from the minute you wake up in the morning to the time you go to bed at night. What emotional intelligence is about is, how do we use those feelings? Do those feelings help us achieve our goals in life, or do they get in the way of those goals? And there's a process of becoming self-aware. The first is just kind of like making meaning out of these quadrants. Are you yellow, red, blue, or green? Then you might ask yourself a question, well, like, why did I pick yellow? What's going on for me today? What am I thinking about? And then you're going to find the word. So I'm going to give you 3 seconds right now to find your best feeling word. 3, 2, 1. All right, freeze. Let me get an honest raise of hands. How many of you had some trouble finding the word? Hands up high. Really high. Like, stretch it out. Really, really, really. Come on, stretch it out. Look around the room. So 80% or so, right, struggled to find the words. Did you have a word? Happy. All right. Who else had a word? Yes. Relieved. I'm not over yet. It's not over yet. Yes, for you. At ease. Back there. Content.
I know some of the words up there, so I'm not going to give them away, but when you started talking about your emotions, earlier today, I was dark blue, and when you started talking about your emotions, I was darker green, 3 or 4, way on the right bottom.
All right, well, all I gotta do is talk about feelings and you get excited. All right, well, we're getting somewhere. This is a good experience for you. Why do you think we struggle, though? What are your hypotheses? Why would it be? I mean, all of you are educated adults. What do you think? Many subtle things, many emotions, for sure. What else? Yeah. Incongruency, like it's hard to just decipher what's going on for me. Other hypotheses that you think. Why would you struggle? Yes, back there. Yeah, you got you.
I think we listen to other people how they feel, and we don't talk about what we do.
We're focused on everybody else except ourselves. Yes, sir.
I was going to say awareness. We're not really aware of it usually.
We're not paying attention to it. Like, how many times have your friends walked up and say, hey, how you feeling today? Doesn't really happen. Maybe we say, how's it going? And then we walk by quickly so nobody says anything. So, we don't have the words, we don't do it, we got so much going on we can't figure it out. There's incongruence in our bodies and minds. Lots of reasons why we might be emotionally illiterate. Now, we're here until 7:30. No, that's what time we started. We're here until 8:30. How many of you, during this presentation, how many of you are going to get distracted? Raise your hand. You're going to, like, your mind's going to wander and you go someplace else and you're going to, like, what am I doing here right now? Anybody raise your hand? Yes? So a lot of you are going to get distracted. So that leads to the big question of our work on emotional intelligence, which is, what are you going to do? Like, what's going to be your strategy to be here with me? Who has a good strategy? Yes? You put your phone away. Not going to get distracted by text and all that other stuff. Other strategies? Yeah? You're going to take notes. Thank you. We've got note takers, we've got avoiders of technologiers. Other strategies? Yeah? You're going to listen. Thank you. So we have a listener, a note taker, and someone's going to put their stuff away. Other strategies? Yeah?
I've been practicing presence more.
You're going to practice being in the present moment more. Is it hard?
I've been practicing it recently, so it's gotten easier.
Great. Good point. We got to, like, put a lot of effort into it, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to try to be present. I'm going to take notes. I'm going to listen. Now let me ask you another question. How many of you during these last 2 years had a moment where you were like, I'm done? Anybody have one of those moments? Every day, right? So I'll give you my own example. My friend Robin, actually, who was sitting up front, who was the associate director of our center, she had the great idea of getting married on March 5th of 2020. See how much happy? It's supposed to be a good day, right? It was a wonderful day. It was a beautiful wedding. The only problem with her wedding was that my mother-in-law came from Panama because she loves Robin and wanted to go to the wedding. But the other big problem is that there were no flights back to Panama because of the pandemic for 8 months. And so I love my mother-in-law. Her name is Irene, and she's amazing. But 8 months. And so it got really rough in my home. I don't have a big house. I was working from home. The world's coming to an end. The stock market's crashing. Everybody's going to be sick. You know, we're like Windexing our oranges and groceries. You know, she refuses to go outside. I'm running my center of emotional intelligence, my kitchen table. Like, nobody's working. Like, what's going on here? I don't even know I'm working. Am I working right now? Watching the news. I'm like having nervous breakdowns. And we started having trouble in our home. Anyone else have any challenges in their home during the pandemic? And so one night, she looked at me and she said, "Are you really the director of the center?" And I looked at her and I said, "Not tonight." And I'll tell you right now, it was one of the worst evenings that I had in my home. Because I lost it, and I was unkind. And then I went to bed that night, and I started thinking to myself, but Marc, you actually are the director. Like, you teach this stuff. But I couldn't use it. I just couldn't apply my knowledge. Did anyone else have that moment? You just could not apply it? And so, you know, I try to think about this from a scientist lens. Like, why was I? Like, I write the book, I write the curriculum, I run around teaching people this stuff, I couldn't do it. And it was because of a variety of things. One, I was depleted of all my resources. I was just like, my fuse was so much shorter than it had ever been. My patience was so much thinner than it had ever been. I didn't have my strategies. I used to go to do like hot power yoga. This isn't hot power. Imagine doing hot power yoga in April of 2020. Like, you're gonna breathe on me in a closed room? I don't think so. Can barely go back now. I didn't have my strategies available. I don't like working from home. And so for me, it was very difficult. I had no space to think. I was always kind of like, somebody walking by, do I feel like greet you this morning? And so I think a large part of what we learned about ourselves during these last couple of years has been, maybe we didn't have a great education about how to take care of ourselves, about how to support our own emotional well-being and growth. And so that's what we're going to focus on tonight. Now, here's what we know from our research. In general, when we have surveyed people around the United States and other countries, this is a summary of about 40,000 teachers in a national study. Anxiety is the number one feeling. When we ask children how they feel, we get a different set of words. We get frustration, we get bored, anxious, sad, lonely, confused. So it looks like, well, one question, right, is are people using the right words to describe how they're feeling? When someone says they're anxious, are they really anxious? When someone says they're frustrated, is that the real feeling? We're going to get into that in just a minute. Before we go there, I wanted to make a big announcement. So during the pandemic, I had an amazing opportunity. Somebody read my book. His name is Ben, and he is the founder and CEO of Pinterest, the company. And I had an opportunity to become very close with him and his team. And we decided to do a project together, which was to take everything that I've been studying and learning about and a predecessor app that Robin and I had built, and let's build something new and wonderful together. So our teams worked together, and we took everything in that mood meter that you saw, and we programmed it into an app, and we're making it available for free for everyone across the world. And so the first thing is you got to check your quadrant. Like, what quadrant are you in today? And then you can say, well, what's my feeling? Am I in that tired state, or am I energized? Am I sad, or am I hopeless? Then you get to tag your feelings for things like, what are you doing? Who are you with? And where you're at. So, where am I? What am I doing? Who am I with? Then, it gives you the option to choose strategies to help you manage your feelings. 36 strategies were programmed into this app using actors and science. That's a weird combo, actors and science. And what's cool about it is that it tracks your data anonymously. We don't see it. It's all for you on your phone. And you can literally unpack your emotional patterns. Like maybe you're in the blue when you're with certain people. Maybe you're in the red when you're working on certain projects. And so I encourage you to try it out. You just go to howwefeel.org and download it. It's all free. And begin your kind of emotional journal. Next slide, please. Now, permission to feel. Permiso para sentir. It's funny because when I was thinking about taking what I've learned for the last 25 years and putting it into like one volume, the people that were helping me do that wanted it to be called something like emotional intelligence to be a leader. And I said, that's boring. I really think it's permission to feel. And like, that's not a good title. You know, that sounds like, that's going to be, like, it's a vulnerable, right? People are going to like, no guy's going to pick up a book called Permission to Feel. They're going to feel discomfort. It's going to be too feminine. It's not going to be masculine enough. I said, for all the reasons why you're like phobic about the title of my book, those are the reasons why we're calling it that. Because that's the problem in our society, right? Is that people are afraid of feelings. Now, none of you really know me that well. Some of you know me because you've been doing this work for years. It took me till I was 49 to be my true self. And what do I mean by that? Well, you know, for years, you know, people would ask me, so Mark, you know, why do you run around the world trying to get people to talk about their feelings? And why are you doing all this work in schools? And I would say, because I hated school. I was bullied in school, which was all true. But there's a deeper purpose for this work for me. And so, I grew up in northern New Jersey. I had two parents who loved me a lot. I wouldn't say any of them went to the College of Emotional Intelligence, but they loved me. I'll give you an example. When I was being bullied horrifically in school, my mother said, "Don't worry, your mother loves you." I'm like, oh, wait a minute, we have a problem here. Basically, you want me to tell the bullies, right, that my mother loves me. And that's going to go really far. I'm not sure that's the strategy that I need to learn right now. My father was a tough guy, self-proclaimed, from the Bronx, New York, and his strategy for me was, son, you're toughen up. Toughen up, son. Now, I'm 52. Do I look like a tough guy? Now, what you don't know about me is I actually have a 5th degree black belt in a Korean martial art called Hapkido. So I could literally eliminate anyone in this room if I chose to. My pinky. But I choose the compassionate route. And so, even with a 5th degree black belt and having been a martial arts instructor for many years of my life, I don't see myself as a tough guy, right? Actually, I call that toxic masculinity. Now, that's kind of what happened with my parents. But there was something even kind of a bit more challenging that happened. Very sadly, between ages of 5 and 10, I was abused by a neighbor. And so, a man on the street was a pedophile, and he abused me from when I was 5 years old to I was 10 years old. And you can imagine it's 5 years of abuse. And I didn't say anything. I'm still wondering, like, Mark, why didn't you say anything? Now, I know for sure that I was threatened by this person. You can't say anything. You're going to be hurt. Your family will be hurt. That's a lot for a 5-year-old to handle. But I also had parents, you know, my mother, again, she loved me, but she was very anxious. And when I was growing up, I'd hear her say things like, "I'm having a breakdown." That was her go-to phrase when things weren't going well. And my father's go-to phrase was, "Son, you're toughen up." As a matter of fact, my father, who I know loved me, even when I was, he would say things, you can't believe this kind of stuff. He'd say things like, "Son, I shouldn't tell you this, but I used to beat kids up like you." I'm like, "Dad," I'm thinking this like now, like, that's not called like father-son bonding. And so, I joke about it now, but imagine what it's like to be someone who's being abused growing up in that kind of context. What happens? You shut down. What happens is you get an eating disorder, which I had as a child. What you get is crying alone in your room, banging your head against the wall. And other things, you know, that I don't need to go into so much detail about. So then, by some wave of an amazing magic wand, when I'm 11 years old, I have an uncle whose name is Uncle Marc. Uncle Marc happens to be a middle school teacher in New York State, who happens to be getting a master's degree in counseling in the hometown where I grew up, who happens to be staying at our home for the summer to go to school. And one weekend, we were sitting in my backyard, and my uncle looks at me like no other adult had ever really connected with me. And he said the following. He said, "Marc, how are you feeling? Really? How are you feeling?" And for whatever it was, his facial expression, his body language, his vocal tone, I just said, "I hate everything. I hate school, I hate mommy, and daddy, and I'm being abused by this neighbor." And he didn't do this. He didn't say, "Oh my gosh, I can't handle this," or "toughen up." He looked at me and he said, "We're going to get through this." And so, this concept of permission to feel is quite deep for me. Because I know that everybody has their own story. My story involves abuse and some neglect and other challenges. Everyone here has a story. And it's not about competing whose story is more dramatic than the other. It's about acknowledging that many of us have been sitting alone with our feelings for way too long. And that we've created a society where it is taboo to be a feelings person. I've also been very curious in my running around the world. How many people have an Uncle Marc? Like, have an uncle, an aunt, a cousin, or a parent, or a teacher, or a neighbor, or someone in their lives who supports them in being their true, full, feeling selves. And I've been even more curious to figure out, well, what are the characteristics of these people? What are their traits? What are their competencies? What do you think? Let's just call them out really fast. If you had an Uncle Marvin, what would be one adjective that you would use to describe that person? Empathetic, thank you. Accepting.
Compassionate.
Compassionate. Non-judgmental. Caring. Understanding. Say it again? I'm sorry. Respectful, thank you.
Approachable.
Approachable. Let's see what the research shows. I'm going to double click. What happened there? Went back to the beginning of things. We went to the end. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. May you figure this out on your own. You can just go click, 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 click. Just click, don't worry about it. Freeze. Okay. So here's what the research shows. This is results of well over 100,000 people. Top characteristic: empathic, compassionate, non-judgmental, supportive, validating, unconditional love, inviting, open, not a fixer, genuine, accepting, encouraging, caring, vulnerable. Now, a couple of questions for you. First, how many of you have been an Uncle Marvin to yourself during the last 2 years? Self-compassionate. Non-judgmental about your own experiences. I have another kind of fun story to tell you. So, literally like a month before everything shut down, I was giving a talk in New York State. And I had never before my 50, when I turned 50, when my book came out, talked about my personal life as much as I shared tonight. It just was something I never talked about. And then I decided, I get so much pressure, like, why do you do this? Why do you do this? I'm like, maybe it's just time for me to be real. And so I'm sharing this story about my Uncle Marvin. And all of a sudden, this one man in the audience stands up out of his seat, like, he's like, are you talking about Marvin Moore, the 6th grade social studies teacher from Monticello, New York State? And I said, I am. He's like, your Uncle Marvin is my Uncle Marvin. I'm like, huh? He's like, your uncle was my teacher 45 years ago. And so I said, well, can you stay after so I can interview you? And let me tell you, it was mind-blowing what this man remembered about my uncle. He said, I remember the sparkle in your uncle's eyes. I remember that gentle smile he had greeting us when we entered the classroom. I remember the magic he did with our classroom instruction. We'd all be talking about our stories, and we'd go weaving it into social studies and come back and weaving it back and forth. So, we can't underestimate, right, the power of being that Uncle Marvin. So what's my take home number one? You gotta be an Uncle Marvin to yourself, and you gotta try to be an Uncle Marvin to as many kids as possible. And here's why. Other research shows only 1/3 of our nation's youth believe this adult in their surroundings that really cares deeply for them about them. That means 2/3 of our nation's youth feel disconnected or alienated. That doesn't require therapy, it doesn't require a master's degree in psychology. It requires effort to build a relationship and to help a kid feel seen and heard. Now, some of you were like, can you get to the research already? I was interviewed recently for a television thing, and the person who was interviewing me, like when I was telling my story, I could see he's like, he was getting so nervous, like, how much more is this guy going to share? And I was ready to go on forever. And he's like, can we talk about the research? Can we talk about the research? I want to know about the science. I'm like, are you uncomfortable with this story? I didn't say that, I was thinking it. But it did make me realize that a lot of people are uncomfortable sharing their stories. And admittedly, I'm a psychologist and a professor of emotional intelligence, and I didn't do it until I was 49. So imagine how much more effort it's going to take most people to go spend their lives thinking about this stuff and learning the skills and strategies. There are 5 reasons why all of you should be here tonight. None of them are to hear my story. It's all about the science. Because when I meet the naysayers, this is what I tell them. There are 5 reasons why you should care about this work. The first is that emotions are the drivers of your attention, memory, and learning. Anyone here get so stressed out during the pandemic at one day or another that you couldn't focus? Anyone have a day like that? Your mind is just like, cannot focus. Your IQ did not change that day. Your cognitive abilities did not change that day. What happened is that your emotion system had power over your ability to use your cognitive system. That's why the emotion system is so linked to your cognitive abilities. I was a C&D student as a kid. Literally, I was failing in upper elementary school and middle school. Do I look like someone who's a failing student? Come on, let's get real here. I'm really freaking smart. The truth is, I couldn't use my smarts because I was worried about getting home safely. When you're worried about getting home safely, you don't care about what you're learning in math or science or language arts. You care about getting home safely. That's what your brain is focusing on, not learning. Survival mode, not learning mode. The list goes on: decision-making, relationship quality, physical and mental health, performance and creativity. Anyone here work with someone or live with someone who's difficult? Like someone who's just difficult. Anyone here work with someone they really just like had trouble with? When you think about that person, was it because of their cognitive abilities? Or was it because of the way they made you feel? Think about that. Emotions at their core are signals to approach or avoid. How I feel on the inside when I wake up in the morning drives, do I want to approach the day or avoid the day? Do I want to be with this person? Do I not want to be with this person? Your facial expressions and body language are sending signals to me right now. It's going well, it's not going well. Continue, run away. That's what the emotion system does. It gives us data, it gives us information about our environments. Physical and mental health. Here's some new data. 90% of the students that I teach are asking for treatment for mental health challenges. 90%. That's like, you might as well just say everybody. And so, it fascinates me. And also, what happens is that the students that I teach don't want to learn this stuff. We just ran a meditation study with about 300 undergraduate students. Adherence to the meditation practice. Guess what the average days were over 8 weeks that students spent practicing? Average days that they spent. How many times over the course of 8 weeks do you think they practiced? What was the average number? 0. Nobody did it. I mean, it was just crazy. No one did the practices because it wasn't something that they thought was important. They're too worried about getting into grad school or law degrees or medical degrees. They don't believe, and they've been trained by their schools that they went to, that this stuff is fluff. That what matters most is putting yourself under so much pressure that you have nervous breakdown so you can achieve. How many of you who are parents here say, yes, that's what I want for my child? Like my vision and hope for my child is that they are miserable in college. I mean, I can't imagine that's anyone's hope or dream. But then what are the messages that we're sending to our students and children every day about what we value and what's most important? Which, by the way, leads to performance and creativity. So, I was a public school student, by the way, all the way through, including my graduate degrees. I didn't know really what a private school was. And when I got to be a professor at Yale, I had imposter syndrome 22 years ago. And guess what? I still have imposter syndrome. I'm like, everybody here's different than I am. Their parents read Shakespeare. My mother told me, get to your room. I asked questions and I was yelled at. Stop asking why so much. And I just thought, every one of the people that I teach had higher SAT scores than I ever had and better grade point averages than I ever thought I could ever have. And they played instruments that I never heard of. And they volunteered in tribes across the world that I didn't know existed. And they got in. And the question is, how are they doing? And as I shared, they're not doing as well as we might think they're doing. What's really interesting to me is this link between emotions and creativity. What I'm here to tell you is that emotions are the fuel to creativity. But what's even more important is that your emotional intelligence is going to dictate, in many ways, whether or not that creativity becomes a product. A lot of people have great imaginations. A lot of people have a million and a zillion ideas. Very few people can follow through with the creative process and complete the product and deliver that product. And what I've learned over 20 years of working with students and people in the business world is something quite interesting. All the cognitive ability, all the creativity in the world, without the ability to deal with your feelings, is insufficient. I don't know about you, but my whole life has been filled with endlessly, it's been filled with endless, I can't get this word out. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that I've got a lot of resistance in my career. I've had teachers say, my job is not to talk about feelings. I've had superintendents tell me that this program is going to turn the boys into homosexuals. I'm like, what? Like, what are you talking about? I mean, I can't give you the list of the resistance that I've gotten in my career. And if I had to take some long, deep breaths and cry to some of my colleagues and say, help me get through this, or figure out how to build resilience, I would not be here right now. Because you have to learn how to deal with your feeling to deal with life's difficulties. The pushback, the rejection, the harsh feedback, the disappointment, the anxiety, the frustration. No one achieves their dreams without that ability to really deal with feeling. So much work. All right, let's go to the next slide. So now this is a big one. This is a big question for all of you. My question is, are you an emotion scientist? Like, do you care about this stuff? Or are you an emotion judge? You're like, you know what? This is baloney. This doesn't matter for anything. Be honest with yourself. My students are emotion judges, believe it or not. I've had a student, I didn't need emotional intelligence to get into Yale. And I look at that student like, well, you need to get out. Now you're asking me to put emotion regulation on my to-do list. Yeah, and like 100 other things. A lot of resistance to this work. People are afraid of dealing with feeling. So where are you? Are you curious, open, or are you critical and closed? Do you want to get granular and like really know how you're feeling? Like, no, I'm feeling this way. No, it's that feeling. Or you're like, it's either good or bad. When you fail at your feelings, or when you fail at dealing with your feelings, what's the story you tell yourself? Do you say, I'm a loser, this is who I am, I'm never going to get any better at this? Or do you say to yourself, you know something, this is an opportunity to learn and grow. I'm going to figure this out. Where do you see yourself? Yeah, both. You know what's interesting about that is that you're right, because some of us are scientists with the people we love the least, and judges with the people we love the most. Anyone ever notice that? Like with your own family, like, get over it. Like a friend of a friend calls you for help, you're like, oh gosh, you want to go for coffee? Let's talk about it. It's amazing. I have to be honest with you, in my house, it's like, are you kidding me? Like, hello. Right? Suck it up, buttercup. All right, next slide. Now, we're going to give ourselves permission to feel. We're going to strive to be emotion scientists and not emotion judges. And now we're like, all right, what are the skills I got to learn? And that's where this thing called ruler comes in, because these are the actual skills. So the first skill is recognizing emotion, paying attention. Like, I'm looking at your facial expressions right now, trying to figure out, are you curious? Are you bored? Are you interested? Are you faking it? That's what we're doing every day. We're reading people's facial expressions, trying to gauge, are you with me or are you not with me? Now, there's some important things to know about this. There are biases in this skill set. Depending on where you grew up, the people who you were around. So if you grew up in a very homogeneous neighborhood with people who all look like you, you're going to have a harder time reading people who have a different skin color than you or a different racial or ethnic background than you have. That's been proven. We're just not as good at reading people from different backgrounds. Like, for example, my martial art is from Korea. I've been to Korea now 20 times, but in my early years, the first time I went there, I had a really hard time unpacking, like, how are people feeling here? Because I didn't grow up with hundreds and thousands of Koreans around me. It's not necessarily a bias. It's just a lack of information, a lack of exposure, a lack of knowledge. Now, there are biases too, by the way. The second is understanding the causes and consequences of emotion. Why am I feeling this way? The third is labeling it with precise words. The fourth is knowing how and when to express emotions with different people across contexts. For example, when I go to Korea, Marc-san. In New Haven, Connecticut, where I work, I don't even get eye contact. I mean, I literally have to pay for eye contact. I go to New York City, give a presentation, like, are you Dr. Brackett? Yeah. Hi. And I need a testosterone injection before this presentation. It's like, this whole, different rules for different people. Now, here's the problem. We all think our rules are the right rules. Right? We think, look at me when I speak to you, look at me when I speak to you. It's a very American way of operating the world. Well, guess what? In Korea, I remember everybody was saying, when you go to Korea, you have to understand the rules there. And so I got so neurotic about this, I was like, hello, sir. Like, don't give eye contact to your teacher, it's going to be disrespectful. I got so nervous, hello. And then finally my martial arts teacher's like, all right, well, we understand you're American, like, you shake hands, it's okay. So you can take it to an extreme and look really weird, like I did. Or you can be the learner and be like, oh wow, this is the way people operate here. It's not wrong, it's different. It's kind of interesting to learn. The last skill is regulation. What do we do with all these feelings? And we're going to spend a little bit more time on that in just a minute. But before we do, we're going to play a game. So I said earlier, when I showed the slide, that when we asked people to describe in their own words how they were feeling, the number one word for adults was anxiety. And I said, well, I'm not sure that's actually the case. Maybe that's just the word that came to mind, or that's the word they were comfortable with. So everyone, anxiety, stress, pressure, fear, overwhelmed. You got 1 minute with people by you. What's the difference? Go.
Stress, anxiety. Anxiety is like an unnamed stress, maybe. Pressure might be more specific. Like pressure to do something. Like stress acting. Here's then something that might be, you might not be able to do anything, right? I mean, that means eventually being overwhelmed, right? There's almost like resignation over it. Yeah.
Okay, let's come back together, please. Who feels confident they've got it right? No clue? At least you're honest. It's so funny because you're saying no clue. I did this talk for about 300 CEOs about 3 months ago. I was like, there's no difference. I'm like, you're overconfident. So, I feel like I don't want to put Henry on the spot here just because he's been... Anxiety, stress, pressure, fear, overwhelm. Oh my! Who's got it? Go for it. Fear is the underlying factor. That's it? I need definitions of every one of these terms. Oh, that's pressure. That was a good use of the word, by the way. Yes, back there.
Going along with what you just stated, one of my friends mentioned fear similarly being the underlying thing, but kind of like the tree to the other kind of emotion.
Okay.
And to kind of carry on with defining each one, I guess anxiety would be the one that you worry about something that maybe hasn't happened yet.
Yep.
Stress would be something that kind of like maybe you're walking around with a weighted vest because of something that happened or something that's not under your control. Pressure. I'm gonna skip that one and go to overwhelming. Being overwhelmed is just kind of having too many, pots cooking on the stove at once, and you can't keep them under control.
Or maybe it's too many things in the pot. I'm kidding.
That can also be true. And pressure, I'm gonna phone a friend.
That's a good game. Pressure, yes. Want to answer that? Other influences. Overwhelmed is hopeless. That's another word, though.
Well,
That was-
overwhelmed is, I know I can't achieve, I can't survive, I can't see a way out of it.
Wow. That's a deep one. You want to add something? Anxiety is how you're hardwired. Anxiety is all over there. Okay. All right. So lots of different perspectives here, which is good. That's what makes us human. Doesn't make us right. Let's go to the next slide. So let's see. What are the definitions? I think we pretty much caught it as a collective. Anxiety, uncertainty about the future. The coronavirus is here. What's going to happen? Oh my gosh. I can't make predictions. That's when we get anxious. Stress. I got too much on my plate. I cannot handle it. I need help. Help me, please. Pressure. Something at stake is dependent on your behavior. Right? The answer. I'm pushing. I'm pressuring. Putting that pressure on you to come up with the answer. That's pressure. That's not stress. It's pressure. A lot of high school and college students confuse these two. As a matter of fact, a lot of my students say, I'm stressed out, but their parents are texting them 15 freaking times a day. And they're just under so much pressure to respond to their parents' check-ins. They call it stress. No. All the meditation in the world is not going to get your parent to stop texting you. You got to tell them, get out of my life. Fear. Feeling as if there's danger. Overwhelmed. Just saturated, overcome by feeling. Which can lead to hopelessness. But in the moment, overwhelmed is just like, you're saturated. Like at the end of a long day, like, I don't know what's going on. That's overwhelmed. Now, why does this matter? Henry. Yeah? There's nuances in everything, but why else? This is your ultimate ruler test. Now, why do we care? Say more.
So you have to identify what you're truly feeling at that moment in order to then work through it, in order to regulate where you are, to express those feelings appropriately for the environment.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you might use different strategies for the different emotions. Does that make sense, everybody? Because when you're anxious, I'll give you the example at my university, everyone's doing breathing exercises. Now, I sound a little cynical when I say that, don't I? And I am. Especially since I just did a study teaching people breathing exercises, nobody did any of them. And so, it's just tough, right? Because everybody's like, take a deep breath. My mother-in-law's looking at me, she's like, who do you think you are? I take a deep breath. Now I'm even clear why you need to get out of my house. Right? So the breathing actually helped me be nastier. I'm like, it's even clear why I can't say anything for the last 5 months. Out. Now, for real, when you're dealing with anxiety, you're making all these predictions in your head, right? This is going to happen, I'm going to be this is going to happen. You got to work on your cognitions. If you don't deal with the cognitive things, the things that you're worrying about, the anxiety will not go away. As a matter of fact, I wrote about this really because it dropped me out of my mind, which is that the other big thing that everyone discovered now after 3,500 years is yoga. And I love yoga. I can do a handstand. I'm an avid yoga person. But I can tell you right now, downward dog is not going to get rid of the pressure. I mean, maybe, it comes out of my rear end or something. Just go downward dog and all the pressure comes out of your rear end. That was gross. But it's ridiculous, isn't it? We want simple things. We just think that, yoga is going to solve the world's problems, or breathing exercise is going to get rid of your anxiety. This is the problem we have in our society. We're a quick fix society. I mean, when you really think about your self-esteem challenges, when you think about the anxiety that you may have had for years, or the overwhelm, or the stress, we need real strategies that we really practice, that we refine over time. Does this resonate with people? How many of you think, we need some dedicated time in our development to really learn this stuff? Yeah. How many of you think this is no, every Thursday at 2 o'clock for an hour, we're sitting in a circle. And we talk about our feelings, then we go into the next subject matter. That's kind of how this work has been done for the most part for the last 30 years. All right. Let's keep going. We're almost done. I thought it'd be interesting to show you from our most recent studies, what are the most recent unhelpful strategies? Does this look like you? Yelling, arguing, avoidance, withdrawal, shutting down, eating, alcohol, binge TV, self-criticism, anger, throwing things. These are all adults who are in the United States, a couple thousand people. We said, what are the strategies that you've been using lately to deal with your feelings? These are all, I think, contributors to well-being and mental health. No, they're not, right? These are the things that get in the way of your well-being and mental health. Would people agree with that? I mean, a little glass of wine is fine. 4 or 5, not so great. Telling someone how you feel, fine, but yelling and screaming at them for 3 hours, not so helpful. Being, a little self-critical, I could have done better in that presentation, not the problem. Endless self-criticism, not great. Now, we're going to end here. We're going to call these the Big 7. How do we get out of this mess? What do we need to teach ourselves? What do we need to help others do in order to have a life that is filled with wellness? So the first is you got to give yourselves permission to feel. Here's a provocative statement. There's no such thing as a bad emotion. Emotions are data, they're information. I've been living with anxiety for many years of my life. But I've also lived with joy and optimism and hope. So at some point you have to make a decision. How much power do you give those unpleasant emotions? And what are my strategies for dealing with them? I'll give you the best example. I travel a lot. I'm finally a million-miler on United. And I've traveled around the world many times doing this work. And every time I get on a plane, there's turbulence. Especially when I'm with Robin, who has serious issues on planes. I get anxious. There's turbulence, I don't know my will, what's going to happen to my family, my dogs, where they can go. And I have a cousin who's a pilot. for American Airlines. And I was talking to him a couple of years ago, I'm like, Rach, like, I just have such stress and anxiety and all that stuff when I'm flying because of the turbulence. I'm like, it's done. And he said, Marc, you know, obviously you don't know anything about turbulence. I'm like, I actually don't know about turbulence. It's like air. It's like, yeah, it's air. And here's what you need to know. In the history of aviation, there has never been a crash because of turbulence. I'm like, are you kidding me? He's like, no, there has never been a crash because of turbulence. So what you're saying is I've been making shit up for 10 years and 15 years and like talking about how I'm gonna die because of this. He's like, yeah, you're wasting your time. Every time I get on a flight right now and there's turbulence, I just think of my cousin Richard, and there goes my anxiety. It's gone. I'm like, Marc, your cousin told you. He was in the war. He flew B-1 bombers. He's a pilot for American Airlines for 30 years. There's never been a crash because of turbulence. Oh, okay. I'm good now. I didn't have a strategy to deal with that particular anxiety. And I learned a strategy, and now that anxiety has diminished. How many of you believe that our children are learning these kinds of strategies for the different feelings they're having at home, at school, on the playground, to really practice them and evaluate them? Maybe some of you are doing it, which is great. It's finally kind of taking on. Managing your physiology. Here's something interesting. When you get activated, you can't think of a strategy. It's why I was so nasty to my mother-in-law, because she activated me, she triggered me. And then when I was triggered, I went, jugular. And I fought back. I had no resources. I could not use all that great stuff in my prefrontal cortex and my hippocampus. Wasn't available to me. So I used fight mode. Some of us use flight mode. Truthfully, the only way to access all those great things that you learn is to find ways to deactivate. You gotta breathe, you gotta step back, you gotta walk out of the room, you gotta give yourself space. You gotta build the space between the trigger and the response. Without that space, you're gonna go into autopilot. Third, managing your body's budget. That's a weird term. Anybody here ever get hangry? Yep. I have this problem because I'm a workaholic. It'll be 10 o'clock at night, I'll be typing, and I'll say something like, oh, I'm so anxious. And I'm like, are you anxious or are you just tired? Well, there's no uncertainty. But I'm so familiar with feeling anxious that when my body gets all kind of shaky and my brain starts having negative thoughts, that I immediately label it as anxious. When in the truth is, I just need to shut my freaking computer, go to bed. Just like hangry is not, you're not actually mad, it's that your blood sugar has dropped and you need some carbohydrates to help you get replenished. Same thing with sleep. Anyone here ever have a terrible night's sleep? And how many of you that next morning feel like you're the best friend, the best partner? No, because you didn't get the replenishing that you need. Managing your thoughts. Anyone here ever use negative self-talk? Would anyone like to just come forth today and share what they say to themselves? We all have negative self-talk, don't we? I grew up being bullied. I know a lot about negative self-talk. You're too fat, you're too skinny, your nose is too big, you're too short, you're too feminine, you're too this. I mean, it's endless how other people will try to define your reality for you. We're not born being self-critics. We're taught to be self-critics. I don't know about you, but that's profound for me. It's just profound because for most of my life, I kind of owned my negative self-talk. I accepted it as a reality. This is who I am. And then I had an epiphany that most of my childhood was about other people defining my reality for me. and there was no one to intervene. There was no one listening to what was coming out of my mouth. There was no one asking me, what am I thinking? And so, just like cancer, that negative self-talk and criticism metastasizes. It becomes you. Because you spend your whole life practicing it. I mean, just think about that. The neurons that wire together, fire together. So you've been practicing all that self-criticism, negative self-talk for years and years and years. You become master at it. It becomes your go-to default strategy. And then someone says, be kind to yourself. Think positive things. Well, you got no practice. And so the negative wins because you don't have enough practice with the positive. And then we try to do it in like this weird way. We try to make it like toxic positivity. Like, tell your things like, everything's gonna be fine. Like, it's okay. Well, actually, it's not okay. Like, there's a crisis right now. So like saying that to yourself is kind of delusional. But saying things like, Marc, you're gonna get through this. Marc, you can do it. Marc, your mother will drive you crazy, but you can take the high road. You know there is another way to do this, Marc. You're going to do it. You're going to take that high road. That's positive self-talk. That's being empathic to yourself. And by the way, that's the trick with self-talk. It's actually helping you build self-compassion. 3 more, and then we're out of here. The next one is managing relationships. That's a simple one. I already shared what that is. You got to be an Uncle Marvin. That's it. The top 3 characteristics: empathy, compassion, non-judgment. Can you do that with everyone that you live with? Or say, no, I can't do it. Just can't do it. It's so easy. How easy is it to be judgmental? Oh, it's so easy. It takes effort to pause and show your compassion. It takes effort to be the curious explorer as opposed to the critical judge. Here's what you need to know. Being an Uncle Marvin doesn't mean you have to say or do anything. The mere presence of an Uncle Marvin is a strategy. How many of you have ever been in the presence of someone that you're just very, very, just whatever it is, they make you uncomfortable? And how many of you have been around someone that just being in a room with them, you feel your nervous system settled? Isn't that incredible? So this is all about perception. It's about appraisals. Literally, when you appraise someone as being your Uncle Marvin, based on whatever those characteristics are of empathy, non-judgment, and compassion, you are going to be healthier. You're going to be in better physical and mental health. Managing situations. Has anyone here ever anticipated getting into an argument with someone? Like you knew, like when you see them, you're getting into a fight. And they don't do anything about it, and then you go there and you get into a fight. So many students, right, I'm anxious about my test. Well, you were anxious on Monday, but you didn't talk about it until 5 minutes before the test. And so now we got to deal with the anxiety in the moment when we could have been working on prevention strategies. We're very intervention-oriented in our society. We wait until we have the emotional breakdown. Then we say, I need help. We're not very forward-thinking about our emotional lives. Finally, finding purpose, meaning, and fun. One of the things that I learned, and I'm still learning, is that some of our best opportunities in life, some of our most amazing ideas come when we do nothing. It's the opposite of everything we've been told. My students have been told, you better sit and stay up in that library until you're 5 o'clock in the morning to figure out that freaking paper and get it done. And they just like, and I say, you know what? Go for a walk. Go take a yoga class. Go have coffee with a friend. I don't know about you, but when I'm struggling to like find solutions to problems, when I go work out, when I go take my walk, I'll be honest with you, I had this thing when I was writing my book, because it was struggling to get every chapter and all the details I wanted, and I didn't want to give myself permission to take breaks. I'm like, all right. And then I would go into yoga, and I'd be like in this like warrior pose. And I'm like, oh my God, I figured it out. And there was a point when I was trying to finish my book, I spoke to my yoga teacher. I'm like, this is going to be really weird, but I'm keeping a paper and pencil. I just have to take notes because everything's coming together in yoga. And I didn't dedicate my book, but I was like a nice little footnote, like, thank you to Power Yoga New Haven. Doing nothing is doing something. You got to give yourself the permission to do nothing. And that nothing might just be going to church or temple or synagogue, wherever you like to go. That's doing something, isn't it? Okay, everyone take a nice long inhale, please. Time for us to wrap up. Get ready. So that's a lot of stuff to think about. And this is just, an hour workshop kind of talk. You got the rest of your life to practice. Lucky you. Now, we're going to stop here. We're going to go back. That was just, I unpacked it without the slides. Now, big 7. Permission to feel. Breathing and mindfulness. Managing your body. Managing your thoughts. Managing your relationships. Surrounding yourself with people who lift you up as opposed to the people who lift you down. Managing situations. Finding purpose and meaning in space. So, as we wrap up tonight, I can't let you go without doing some goal setting. So my first question for all of you is, what's your strategy? Which one are you going to latch on to tonight? Which one speaks to you as one that, like, you know what? I need some practice in that space. Please find that strategy. Now what I want you to do is imagine your life in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year from now. Applying that strategy. What do you see? What's different for you? And we'll end when I hear from 5 people. That's called pressure. Fulfillment, thank you. You take one of these strategies, you start practicing it more. What's different for you? What do you notice? Yes?
By managing my thoughts, and managing more of the positive self-talk that I've got, I see myself being more confident.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Greater confidence, yes? Kind of being who you really are, your authentic self. That's 3. Yeah?
I would be a role model for my kids.
Be a role model for kids. And back there.
More connected and in tune with yourself.
More connected and in tune. Thank you. So let me wrap up by saying just a few last things. Thank you, by the way, for coming out tonight. Deeply appreciate it. I know that it's still weird to go out in public for presentations. It's, in Zoom, you just like shut down, all right, go to the bathroom, have a drink. Now you gotta like drive here, you gotta sit in a room. Oftentimes when I do these kinds of public speaking events, some people will come up to me and say, but Marc, with all the stuff that you shared about yourself, like, you made it, like, you're successful. And I say thank you, but like, there's a lot more to the story. And so, just to think about all of the systems that need to be put in place to ensure our healthy development. Yeah, I had trauma in my childhood, no doubt about it. It was horrific to be abused by a neighbor for many years. My parents, the truth is, when my parents found out about it from my uncle and me, my father got a bat and went to kill the person. And thank God we figured out how not to make that happen. Person went to jail. Created a lot of chaos. My parents were not psychologically trained, but they got me a therapist. So at 11, I was, with a therapist, talking through this once a week. Remember, I got Uncle Marvin. He gave me permission to feel. He gave me the language to describe my feelings. He created the space for me to feel comfortable and safe to be my true self. I also got involved in the martial arts. It's a big deal to get a black belt when you're like 15 years old, and I had confidence. I went to college. I majored in psychology. I got a doctorate in psychology, right? And spent 25 years of my life writing curriculum and teaching the skills of emotional intelligence, and I still messed up with my mother-in-law. This is life's work, and we don't treat it as such. And so I ask you, as we wrap up today, to just think about the children in your lives, your own children, your grandchildren, the students that you teach. And ask yourself this: are they getting the emotion education they need to achieve their dreams in life? To deal with all of life's ups and downs? Are they really getting that emotion education they need? And so, I just don't think they are yet. I'm just going to be straightforward. As someone who leads this work, I just don't see the systems yet in place in our society. From the way it looks in government right now, sorry for saying that, but you know what I'm talking about. From the rules that we have in schools around bullying and suspension policies, to what teachers learn in teacher preparation programs, to what parents learn. We're just not there yet. Now, I can't say tonight is a magic pill. Wish it were, but I hope it was a great place to start. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
I thought Marc was going to keep the microphone and keep asking you questions rather than allow you to ask him questions.
I'm an introvert, I hate questions.
So, whoever wants to come down first, feel free to do so.
Or you can, because of time, let's make it easy if you don't mind. Somebody, I also realize that I'm not offended if you need to get up and leave. I get it, you got things to do and places to go.
And a lot of you have used your outdoor voice, and so if you have a question, speak from where you are.
I just have a comment. I had a kindergartner, third grader, and fifth grader over the pandemic. And the first thing my kindergartner did was make a movie theater.
Oh.
Or the Western Public Schools, and he's got it all figured out, so thank you.
That is awesome to hear. Thank you for sharing that. So, cool. It's nice to see this work spreading in our state.
Well,
Yes.
yeah.
I teach 7th grade band here in town, and I work with up to 100 kids at a time, and they're 11, 12, and 13. And in fact, it's my very, very peaceful place because I've been doing it so long, I have so much practice. But thanks to you and your book that was introduced to me before the pandemic, to this year my goal was teaching as a ruler, recognize, understand, label, and express, and regulate. And now, during class, I will frequently go through those 5 steps if I feel frustration or anything. So it is getting passed down to children.
Appreciate that.
And, yeah, and thank you.
Well, thank you for doing it. It's the work that matters. Yes, please.
I was reading your book. I had to read it.
You had to read it.
And then
I force you to have permission to feel.
I forgot to read it. I used Google Reproduction in my classroom,
That's awesome.
and I also used it in my marriage. Thank you.
I try to use it in my marriage, except the problem, you know the meta moments? Those of you know what a meta moment is. It's one of our tools. It's like when you stop, you pause, you see your best self, and then you strategize. And so my partner's like, you're taking a meta moment right now, right? He's like, yeah, so you really want to say something mean and hurtful, right? I'm like, kind of. And so now I've got to figure out the strategy to deal with the strategy. But I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that.
Back there.
Yeah.
What would you say were your biggest hurdles as an author trying to publish this book?
Well, one is finding I'm a typical academic type. You know, I do research, and so making it accessible and interesting. I like to tell stories, so the truth is, the way I wrote my book, I should probably share share this too publicly, but whatever. I just started giving presentations and recording myself. Because my speaking voice is not as academic as my professor voice. And so I just started talking a lot, and like, today I'm going to think about this particular thing, and I go, and then I would transcribe it, and I would figure out a way to write it from there. And so my biggest hurdle was trying to take everything I had learned and put it into like one thing. Now, of course, I want to do the next one, which is all about that big 7 stuff. Because I think that I've had people say to me during the pandemic, they're like, thank you for giving me permission to feel, but now I don't know what to do with all these feelings. And so trying to figure out, how to help people manage better. And I think it needs its own thing to help people unpack those strategies. Yeah.
In the back?
Yes, please.
Thank you so much for this. It's so helpful, and I wonder, I've got a middle schooler. Is there any movement to create a program for kids based on this? Because my kids,
there is.
Yeah, because I don't feel like just I'm in a school and maybe somebody will hear it, but this year I've got an 8th grader who came home on a Friday afternoon. They had a talk about suicide, and then there's a weekend and there's no processing in the school,
Yeah.
any experts, or they're taught mindfulness, and they really don't have this sort of thing at all. And I think that I just wish we'd prioritize more of this stuff in the school with some tools.
I agree. So today was what I didn't even, for those of you who know what Ruler is, it's a whole curriculum from preschool to high school. I didn't even go into that tonight. This is just the kind of the background, the content of the work. But what I would recommend is that, send your superintendent an email and CC me. Not sure, don't BCC me. All right, let's take 3 more questions, then we'll figure out the rest of our lives. Yes.
My first question, I have about some poetry.
Thank you.
I find myself a little bit paralyzed. On the first one, I'm 0 and 3 and 0. I find myself in the middle. I find myself spread. Same thing with the big 7. I'm like, oh, that one, or that one. I can do. What do you recommend for that?
Yeah. Give yourself a break. Honestly, don't just, you've already fallen into the emotion judge mode. And so just say something, right now I might be overwhelmed. Or, when you say the word paralyzed to me, that doesn't sound like 0, 0. Right? So paralyzed sounds slightly more on the unpleasant side and kind of low in energy, like you're stuck.
I think I don't want to be there, so.
Maybe, try the app out, play with it, move your finger around, and just start asking yourself questions, look at the definitions, and over time, you'll just get more, as you say, granular. Most of us grew up in a society, in a family, where it was good or bad, right? Happy, sad, mad. That was it. Now we have words like disappointment versus anger versus frustration versus overwhelm, and we're not even sure what any of these things actually mean. So I would say just practice. You don't have enough practice. Yeah. Thank you. Uh-huh. Yep. It's opportunity.
The question I have for you is devices. Even though I have a terrible screen time monster apparently.
I think that's great.
But this is the battle, and I also see the checked outedness as such a thing. But how as a parent would you advise us to combat? I mean, to me, this looks like total disconnection from emotion.
Sure.
I don't know what my advice, but I really maybe appreciate maybe some positives that come.
There are plenty of positives for technology, but I think, yeah, so her question is that, her kids, like many kids, are kind of attached to their devices, and then if you become very rigid about that, right, they get resentful of this.
But really just, how do you keep them mindful to be connected to emotion when a lot of the life is on screen?
Yeah, it means intentionality. It means you're taking a walk with your kids after dinner, and no devices, and it's like breakfast, we have, classroom or home kind of rules around breakfast time is conversation time, meal time is, I think you just gotta build it in. You gotta replace it. You can't just eliminate one thing and just think that's gonna work. I would say replace it with something that is gonna be productive and engaging, and be the role model. One of the things that I tell a lot of dads are like, I don't even know where to begin with this stuff. Like, I never learned how to talk about my feelings. I'm not talking about my feelings. And I always tell them, like, just share an experience that you had at work. Like, come home and say, honey, Daddy had a really rough day. I got into an argument with someone and we disagreed, and I said something that wasn't very kind, and I really don't like myself for doing that. And if I look off tonight, it's because that's what happens. Look at that. You've shared, like, Daddy has fights, Daddy reflects, Daddy problem solves, Daddy talks about his feelings. All that happened in literally 1 second. And so just thinking about being that role model, as somebody said.
And our last question was, yeah, right there.
Yeah.
To have any quick advice, research, etc., to help advocate for a community that feels for a community or district that doesn't see the value
Yeah.
in EQ approaches and sees the gratitude side only.
So it's more limited. So the question is, how do we get more stakeholders on the bus, on the Emotion Revolution bus? Because they're maybe like trying to say, bus, keep going by. They don't want the bus to stop there and keep, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we know that that's not the best way to go, because not everybody's happy. I don't even like happy people. I'm just kidding. I'm envious of them, because I'm like, oh, where did that come from? I worry about everything. I worry about why I worry. Every morning I wake up and I have an existential crisis, and I'm like, oh no, it's okay. So what I would say to you is a couple of things. One is education, education, education. People just don't know what they don't know. I'm just telling you that right now. The number one thing when we do our superintendent trainings and leadership trainings, I say, what was your biggest takeaway? I had no idea about all this science. I had no idea there was actually a set of skills that can help you be wiser about your feelings. And so I would find a way to educate people. And it could be sending links to sites, it could be setting up meetings, it could be recommending books or articles, just getting people educated more. And then send me an email, let me know the district. And I'll do my work. The good news for us right now is that in Connecticut, we've got about 40 to 50% of all schools doing this work. So we've got schools from urban to rural to suburban, male, female, LGBTQ, every race that's all doing this work. So it's like there's no excuses anymore, because we can demonstrate that this works in all communities. One of the things I learned early in my career was that Connecticut's a weird place. Like Greenwich is Greenwich, and Bridgeport is Bridgeport, and New Haven is New Haven, and Danbury is Danbury, and Hartford's Hartford, and whatever else is whatever else. And nobody cares about what anyone else is doing. They just want to know, is this correct, or is this going to work for my community? And so I put a lot of effort in our center to make sure that we've shown that this works in every kind of community, which is important. And so those naysayers, just send me an email, let me know who they are, and we can try to get, the Superintendent's Association and other groups to really kind of push that leadership to think differently. Everybody, I'll just end by saying, if I had my magic dust in my pocket, I would just throw it out and say, I give you the permission to feel, I give you the permission. But unfortunately, you're all adults, so you're gonna have to work and give yourselves permission to feel. Thank you so much for coming out tonight.